Many physicians today find themselves carrying a quiet but persistent tension, trying to meet the demands of medicine while also showing up for their lives outside of it. And often it can feel like no matter how much they give, it's never quite enough. Welcome to the Life-Changing Moments podcast and videocast. In this series, we offer a window into the kinds of conversations that happen in coaching, the real challenges physicians are navigating, and how they begin to find their way toward a more fulfilling life. We explore what shows up in the coaching room, the themes that are sometimes spoken and sometimes just beneath the surface. As you listen, you may notice a few small shifts in how you think or what you do. But this isn't about quick fixes. It's really an invitation to recognize something of yourself in the conversation and to consider what changes might open the door to more meaning, engagement, and even a sense of ease in your work and the rest of your life. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by Dr. Cindy van Praag, the latest wonderful addition to our coaching lineup at MD Coaches. Cindy is an anesthesiologist and a coach who works primarily with physician moms, helping them navigate the often competing demands of medicine, family, and self. We'll explore those themes along with what health and wellness coaching looks like in practice. So Cindy, welcome to MD Coaches again, and welcome to Life-Changing Moments.
Oh, thank you, Dael. That was a wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. I'm honored to be here.
Well, thank you. Just for our audience to get to know you just a little bit in terms of background, before we get into some specific questions about coaching, physician moms specifically, and health and wellness coaching, can you just share a little bit about your pathway, medicine, and then most specifically, how you got into coaching and what drew you to focus on physician moms specifically?
As you mentioned, I'm an anesthesiologist. That was my first venture in life. And I'm still a practicing anesthesiologist. But about 15 years into my practice, I answered an inner call towards integrative medicine. And that was a big shift in my life. So I actually joined a fellowship out of the University of Arizona for integrative medicine and learned not only how to take care of patients from a more holistic perspective, but how to take care of myself. So that was educational and healing for myself. And I bring in that program because they had a sister program that's called Integrative Health and Wellness Coaching. And I was just cruising the alumni board one day and I saw a colleague asking for help to get her hours with her coaching program. And I thought, well, I'd love to do her a favor. I don't need coaching. I really didn't know what it was about. And I signed up. I'm like, sure, I'll help you out. We're from the same place. We're cut from the same cloth. And oh boy, little did I know what a change that would be. That was another major shift in my life. Even though I'd already been through this integrative medicine training and I knew how to take care of myself, I was learning how to meditate, but then I got introduced to coaching. And she really helped me through I was having a difficult portion of my life, as we all do, but she happened to show up right when that was at its peak. And she didn't tell me what to do, but she drew out answers in me that I didn't know I had. And I think I navigated that time with so much more ease than if she wasn't in my life. And then it hit me. I thought, oh my gosh, this is really cool. This is a physician coaching a physician through difficulties in life. And I decided then that I need to sign up for this program too. And that's what led me into starting my own practice in helping physician moms specifically go through periods of life that I've been through in much the same way that my coach helped me. So yeah, it was firsthand experience that got me into coaching.
That's awesome. It's amazing kind of what shows up in our life at the time that we need it the most, even though we don't necessarily know that we needed it the most.
Right.
When physician moms come to you for coaching, what are some of the themes that show up again and again?
Oh, that's a loaded question because there are so many and it's across the board. Everybody's different. But if I had to categorize them as themes, I would say there are internal factors and external factors. By internal, this is my own categorization, but I would say internal would be things like sleep problems. I need to move more. I just feel exhausted all of the time. I feel out of control. And external factors would be, I'm having these issues at work and these people, and they're just not listening to me, and relationships and my schedule and the systems that they work in. And so those are the initial themes that draw people to me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what they end up working on. It's really interesting how it changes.
Can you say something more about what sort of emerges as a result of the conversation with you? That's on the surface, but then once they start having conversations, something else emerges.
So I call those the underlying drivers. And those can be internal and external, but those tend to be things like self-criticism, fear of doing something wrong, guilt, feeling, again, out of control. Control seems to come up a lot. And it can be a lot of internal processes like that women choose to work through that in turn ends up helping the primary reason they came.
It kind of maybe goes back to the surface, but those things that are below the surface and those internal conversations and the challenges that people have and the arguing they have with themselves, how do those inner conflicts tend to show up in their day-to-day lives?
Right. So the inner conflicts, in my opinion, seem to hold them back from doing what they love in life. And the women will say this, that I've just stopped doing all the things I used to love. I'm not the person I was. I don't recognize who I am. They are constantly doing things for other people and they feel guilt. And so these underlying drivers change their behavior and they become a person that they don't recognize. And when we start discussing the underlying drivers, then they can choose a different behavior and become more of the person that they want to be.
What I'm hearing you say, there's this sense of responsibility for so many and sort of losing the self in that. And my guess is there's my favorite metaphor these days is, laying down neural pathways for that kind of behavior that's pretty thick. How do some of your clients begin to work their way over those barriers or those neural pathways, if you will, laying down some new neural pathways?
Oh, I love the topic of neuroplasticity. I'm so glad you brought that up. Oh, my goodness. It starts with a small step. To try to think of it otherwise is overwhelming. To try to say I'm going to change my entire life and be a different person is just too much to manage. But small steps are manageable. Steps that, and what helps is that women choose steps that they feel like they have the energy for, they feel confidence that they can achieve, and then they do it. And once you start winning and accomplishing those small steps, slowly over time, it starts compounding and you start laying down that new path. And it gets a little bit easier to follow those steps and add on more steps. And if you think of a field of grass and you're trying to lay down a new path through a field of grass next to one that the cows have walked, and it's all worn away and it's all gravel, but you're going to walk in this new path through this field of grass. And the first time you walk, the grass gets tamped down a little bit. And so the second time you go along your path, it's a little bit easier because you can see where you've been. And the third time and the fourth time and the fifth time you start down this new path, it gets easier and easier. And pretty soon you have your own gravel path that you have laid down. And I compare that to the neuroplasticity in the brain and forming new pathways in your brain through your behavior. And that is entirely within our reach, entirely possible, and every person has the power to do that. And it takes stepping back and having perspective and working on those small steps to get there, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. I love the kind of the stepwise approach that you're talking about, the incremental ways in which that happens, because that is kind of the way the brain works as well. What strikes me as one of the themes that seems to come out with women physician moms is just how much it's the 36-hour day. There's a whole lot that has to be done. There's a whole lot that they feel responsible for. And I'm imagining that this new gravel pathway means that some of those things are now getting taken care of by somebody else, or they're certainly not taking care of it anymore. There's got to be some letting go of some things. And so do you have some examples of how there are some clients that you've worked with that have let go of stuff, and how was that for them to let go of that, and how are they doing having let go of that?
Yeah, there's a couple of different things that spring to mind that I've talked about. One would be delegation, but I think the more important thing, the second thing, would be prioritizing what matters most. Delegation is important too, but when you prioritize, you can get rid of some things that seem important because you're doing them every day, but maybe they're not so important. And I don't mean taking things off your list that are valuable to you. I mean prioritizing them. And so this comes back to time too. So you mentioned the 36-hour day when it's really 24 hours. We only have so much time, and time is a big concern for physician moms and all human beings, really. But when you stop and prioritize what matters most, and then you find you will make the time for what matters. And how do you know what matters most? How can you choose between this laundry list? Well, that comes back to, what do you value? What aligns with your sense of purpose? What are your goals in life? What do you love the most? For example, for me, and maybe a lot of other women, it's my kids. I prioritize my kids. So when I would have my laundry list of things to do, I would pick, well, what kind of legacy am I leaving for my kids if I choose this pathway? If I choose this other pathway, will I be home when they get home in the evening to spend time with them? Just so I would base my choices for a period of my life on that value and that purpose. And everybody has a different set of values and purpose and goals and loves and desires. And that's how you figure out what matters most to you. And when you start prioritizing those things that align with those values, then you'll find the other things aren't as important, and you can take those off the list.
As you were talking, I was thinking of something I learned a long time ago about, how to organize your work. Yeah. And it was like a 2x2 table. It was, urgent and non-urgent,
yes,
and important and not important. And and when you look at that, it's like I spend a lot of time in the unimportant, non-urgent stuff, like stupid email stuff. As an example, there's like hundreds of emails, and for some reason I feel it's like there's this drive to empty the message box or the email box, but that's not really where we should be putting our energy. Yes. As an example, and I actually had a client who said exactly that. They realized, I'm spending all this time on email, and I'm not spending time with my partner, for example. And the email can wait. I can kind of triage the email. The stuff that's like I can wait. It can wait, or I don't need to look at it at all, and start deleting subscriptions to those emails, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I love your concept of values and priorities for your life. It's not just what's urgent and important at work. I think you've kind of answered this already, but for somebody who's listening to our conversation right now, who recognizes themselves in what you're describing, what are a couple of small shifts that they could experiment with after they turn off this show?
Yeah, so one of them would be to prioritize what matters most. Some other shifts would be some other things I could do in the moment that are very powerful and don't take much energy to do would include, one is breathing. And I feel like some people roll their eyes when I mention breath work and breathing, but it's evidence-based. So we know, and there are multiple studies that show, that when you're running all over the place, you're running your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight is revved up, and you're go. And if you can break that cycle and take a deep breath, you can move into the parasympathetic nervous system, as you know, you're a physician, but it's the rest and digest part of our nervous system, and it breaks the cycle of this overdrive and this stress and thought rumination even. And the way to do that is so simple, and no one has to know you're doing it. You can just simply take a deep breath in the middle of a conversation. Just take a deep breath in, 5 seconds, and let it out. And no one knows you did that. And if you repeat it maybe 2 or 3 times, that breaks the cycle. And so that's one small thing that someone can implement today, and even right now as they're listening, and just see how you feel after doing that.
A nice simple start, because it doesn't take hardly any time at all. There's a big impact for very low cost, as in zero cost for that.
Yeah.
So that's great. Thank you. Our culture is a pretty busy culture, and the medical culture is a very busy medical culture. Are there ways to think differently about balance, expectations, and even self-talk that can begin to loosen things up for people? This is more like the cognitive part of this.
Yeah. Right. There's the physical part and there's the cognitive part, what happens, what's going on in your brain. And I like to think of one thing in particular. It's the dichotomy of control. So if you think in this busy world, what are the things on the one hand that I can control? It's my thoughts, it's my tone of voice, it's what I say, it's how I respond to somebody. And on the other hand, what are the things that are completely out of control? No matter how much I can wish that I could control what that person does or says, or and you name it, whatever I can wish but I can't achieve, those are the things I cannot control. And if I can release the things I cannot control and just focus on what I can, that frees up a lot of mental space and energy, and that connects into the physical energy too. Now you're not draining yourself on things that you cannot control. That would be one big mindset shift.
That is a very big one. I agree with you. Especially for physicians who are working in healthcare systems or in large groups, and where there is a whole sort of level of management, and we may have input, but we may not have input. And there's maybe a bunch of things that we just don't have any input about that at all.
Yes.
And whereas we may be used to having had input, to know, it's kind of the serenity prayer.
True.
Can you notice what you do have something that you can do something about, and notice the things you can't do anything about, and really be able to notice the difference, and then move yourself forward from there. I think it's for me, an ongoing practice. It's an ongoing practice.
Yes.
What tends to get in the way of making even some small changes in your clients that you've noticed?
The feeling that I don't have time to sometimes even make it to a coaching session. It's just, it gets deprioritized. So to make small changes, you have to make the time, and the way to make the time is to prioritize. So it does come back to prioritizing what matters and realizing that working on yourself in even small steps and making small changes can have big results. And it's easy to tell somebody that, but it's hard to believe it until you start living it. And so just give it a try. Give it 1 or 2 small steps and see.
What you just said, it brought up something that I heard from a surgery resident She was like a senior resident, and she had a commitment to her physical health. And she says, I'm going to go to the fitness center minimum of 3 times a week, even as a senior third year, or I think it was a 4th year surgery resident.
Wow, yeah.
She says, I'm going to go to the fitness center 3 times a week. Literally, that meant sometimes she just walked into the fitness center and then walked out.
Yes.
And I love that because she says, I just want my body to get used to going there. And if I would post-call, I've been up for 24 hours, it's not a good time for me to exercise. I still went anyway, and I walked in and walked out so that I have a muscle memory of going there 3 times a week. And then if I'm not tired and I can exercise, then I do, and I have the time to do it. And it's like it's on the way home. It didn't take any longer to do that. But it was a small incremental step that she sustained. Wow. I just think that's a brilliant example of what we're talking about.
And it's a brilliant example that she came up with on her own.
And she came up with it on her own, exactly. And she shared it with others who really resonated with how possible that is for themselves to do that. You trained in integrative health and wellness coaching, as you shared earlier. What is that? I think you're giving us some examples of what that means in practice, but say a little bit more about that and how that shows up.
It's called integrative because it takes a whole person approach. And by whole person, that means several areas of someone's life. So you hear health and wellness coaching, you think, oh, they help you eat well or exercise or sleep well. And yes, to all 3 of those things, yes, yes, and yes. But it's more than that. It's also areas of a person's life that include relationships with other people, relationships with themselves. It can include spirituality or sense of purpose. It can include things like your environment, which has a dramatic impact on people, even just your home environment. If you could see my desk right now. So it could be your desk, it could be your car, it could be your work environment. And it takes into account all of these things that touch a person's life and well-being. And it allows that person to choose an area that they have the energy for and the bandwidth for and the confidence to approach and make improvements on. And the beauty of it is that all of these things are intertwined. So when someone starts working on one area, let's just say my desk, I thrive when things are a little more tidy. So right now it's a little bit I have papers everywhere. So if I even just spent 5 minutes tidying up my desk, that would give me a sense of calm. It would make me feel more focused. And in turn, that affects my productivity. It affects my clarity. And it affects all these other areas of that circle. So the integrative part is how coaches are recognizing that all of these things touch on each other. It doesn't matter whether the client starts because they all touch each other. And so it's just focused on that whole person part of it.
Do you actually ask some questions to kind of get an assessment of how their whole life is so you can get a feel for that?
Right. Yes, if the client is open to it, I do have assessments. And in fact, one of them is kind of down the line of your values and your goals and what you love and desire. And another assessment is that circle that I talked about. And just seeing where they are that day on that circle in each of those categories. And if they don't want to dive into assessments, that's fine too, because it can come up later in all different ways. But some people like having a little bit of a structure at the beginning just to figure out where they want to go. And that is available, definitely is very well taught in integrative health and wellness coaching.
So if there were one thing that you'd want physician moms that are listening to take away from this conversation, what would it be?
Just that you are enough. You are enough. You are enough to get out of whatever feeling or stress or cycle, or maybe things are going well. You are enough in all of those situations, and you have the power to make decisions that can improve your life. It's all within you. You always have control. You always have a choice.
what a wonderful message for people who are listening to take away as a result of this conversation. Cindy, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation, but a little bit of a glimpse of what happens in the coaching room. I know it's not necessarily a room; sometimes that's a virtual room, but there is some magic, and it is amazing the process of this partnership of thinking partnership with people, and that frame that works really well when we kind of create a space and a container for people to explore themselves. So thank you for amplifying that message, and thank you for being here. And I get to work with you some more, so I look forward to that. And hopefully some of our listeners will get to work with you as well. So thank you once again for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning into Life-Changing Moments. If you enjoyed this episode, then please give us a rating, a thumbs up, or a subscribe. Doing so helps our show meet more listeners. If you have something to share, drop us an email at info@mdcoaches.com. Join the conversation today.